Should you go with burn or poison? The quick answer is it depends, and the way you would know is by doing a DPS calculation. Damage per second on weapons is very simple. If you have a 5-second cooldown weapon that deals 5 damage each hit, it deals 1 damage per second. And it scales proportionally, so if you double the damage, it doubles the DPS. So it's really easy to know how damage buffs affect your board. So let's say you have a silver double barrel that deals 40 damage twice every 3 seconds. It will deal 160 damage before it runs out of ammo in 6.2 seconds, which gives it a DPS of 25.8 if you're able to keep the ammo up. But if it runs out of ammo and the fight only lasts 30 seconds, it has a DPS of 5.3. The sandstorm comes in around 32 seconds, so the fight is not really going to last longer than 40. On average, it should end quicker each day, so you'll have less time for burn or poison to tick, assuming you don't have a bunch of healing or shield. Burn and poison are a lot more complicated to calculate. Poison will start at 0 DPS, and then once you have applied the poison, it will deal the amount of poison in DPS. And it really scales heavily towards the end of the fight. Here we can see the amount of damage that poison items are able to do over time. These two graphs are the same, the bottom one is just over less time. And you can see that you really want to extend that fight as long as possible, so that you can get to the part of the graph where it curves up. So pairing it with healing, shield, or regeneration is optimal for getting the most out of your poison. And past day 10, when the level ups are giving 500 HP and the fights are less than 10 seconds, the poison is really going to be tricky to lethal your opponent. When an enemy is burned, it ticks twice per second and deals damage each tick. It also loses 1 burn each tick. So it's extremely important to average adding more than 2 burn per second. Here we can see different 5-second cooldown burn items. The ones with more than 10 burn are able to deal so much more damage than the ones with less, because the burn is able to continuously grow on your opponent. The difference between 5, 8, and 10 burn barely makes a difference because it's all fizzling out, where the 12 and the 15 burn deal so much damage towards the end of the fight. Once the amount of burn that you put on is double the time it takes to apply the burn will be able to grow faster than its 2 times per second depletion. If we were tracking the DPS or the burn on the enemy, it's basically the same for the 5, 8, and the 10 burn, while the 10 and the 12 are able to separate itself away. Even if the burn isn't able to grow, having the higher number that is applied less often is better. Here you can see 10 burn applied every 5 seconds versus 6 burn applied every 3. The 6 burn is only better for the first 6 seconds of the fight, where this didn't really matter for poison. Once we put it all together, you should start to see where the burn is able to surpass poison. 5 poison applied every 5 seconds is better than 10 burn every 5 seconds if the fight is longer than 25 seconds. So those first few days, when those numbers are low and the fights are long, poison is better than burn. But you can see the massive jump from 10 to 12 burn, and once you're able to make the burn grow, poison just can't keep up with it. The weapon damage is fine for the first 15 seconds, but if it goes on longer than that, the burn and the poison really adds up. Once the numbers get extremely large, like 100 burn and 100 poison, the burn ticking twice per second is so much more relevant than the burn depleting twice per second. And the poison really struggles to do anything until the item is triggered 3 times. The other major factor in deciding burn versus poison is shield in the meta. Burn only deals 50% damage to shield, so it'll deal the same DPS as poison. And poison is completely unaffected, so it'll go straight under the shield, ignoring the shield that your opponent has and blocking the 50% debuff that the shield would give to burn. It can be a negative though in the case of like Eccentric Etherite, the day 3 PvE elite monster fight, where if you're only dealing poison damage, then you're not going to be able to knock off enough shield to prevent him from dealing 200 damage to you. So now that you know how to calculate DPS, what do you think deals more damage over a 30-second fight? A 3-second cooldown 50 damage weapon, or a 3-second cooldown 10 burn item? So if 10 burn is able to be sustained on your opponent, that'll be 20 DPS. Is the weapon dealing more than 20 DPS, and are you able to sustain the burn? The burn is a smaller number, but it's happening so many more times per second that it's better than the damage. The 3-second cooldown 50 damage weapon has a DPS of 16.7. So as long as you're able to keep that burn above 10, you know it's going to deal 20 DPS. An in-game example of how to apply this is which of these 4 items should you not play? Katana is low on DPS, but it doesn't run out of ammo, and we know that poison is really good these first few days, so do we want the double barrel or cannon? They both only have 2 ammo, and the double barrel does 80 damage before it runs out. The cannon does 50 damage, and it also applies 3 burn twice. So each of those 3 burns will deal 6 damage. If the cannon got to say 6 burn, then those burns would deal 21 damage, and it would be more than the double barrel. But the burn barely makes a difference here, so we go with the double barrel. The decisions you make are not just purely mathematical, they have to take into account the current meta and what is in play. Burn and poison have faster tick rates than weapons, so it might be the difference in lethaling your opponent slightly faster than them. Where with a weapon you might be a few damage off and then have to wait for it to reload again. Heal removes 1 burn and 1 poison, and this is really only a factor on those first few days, where it can be a huge difference. Haste, slow, freeze, and charge obviously make the math so complicated that you can't just do a DPS calculation. You can't always exactly know what's going to be better, but there are trends that you can follow. Poison is really good early, and you need to be applying double the burn that it takes for the cooldown of that item to burn to go off. And these can be extremely important to know what items to choose. There are so many more things to consider, like scaling during the fight, where to place the dually cores, and crit chance, where being able to factor in everything is the whole point of the game, and it's a continuous process to try and get your projections to match the outcomes.